In 1904, a priest from rural Portugal built a machine that could melt iron in under a minute, liquefy tungsten, a metal with the highest known melting point of any element on Earth, and reach temperatures high enough to fuse dust into stone. But what made this device particularly remarkable was that it ran without electricity, without fuel, and without a single combustion event. In fact, the entire machine needed only sunlight and mirrors to operate. It was so extraordinary that it won the grand prize at the largest World's Fair in American history, described by the New York Times as the most remarkable invention at the entire event, and allegedly even attracted an offer from the United States government. But just as it seemed ready to change the world, it disappeared. And the man who built it returned to Portugal and never pursued solar energy again. So, how did this device work? What did it do? And more importantly, where did it go? Manuel Antonio Gomes, better known as Father Himalaya, was born on the 9th of December, 1868, in Arcos de Valdevez, a rural corner of northern Portugal. His family worked the land, and as a boy on those fields, he observed something that few of us have ever appreciated. After violent lightning storms, the crops always looked greener and healthier. And while he did not have the scientific understanding for it yet, what he observed was the fixation of atmospheric nitrogen, lightning forcing nitrogen from the air into the soil, creating a natural fertilizer that allowed the crops to flourish. It was this single observation that sparked a lifelong fascination with harnessing the power of nature. He envisioned a future powered by the sun, a future that could recreate the magic of those lightning storms and replace the dirty coal engines that were beginning to drive Europe's industrial revolution. He studied in Paris under Marcelin Berthelot, one of the founders of modern thermochemistry, and came to the conclusion that would define his life's work. If he could concentrate sunlight to sufficient temperatures, he could not only replicate the nitrogen chemistry of lightning, but also melt iron, drive steam engines, and replace coal in some of the most energy-intensive industrial processes in the world. But harnessing the power of the sunlight was not exactly a new idea. Far from it, in fact. Greek legend credits Archimedes with designing a weapon of mirrors in 212 BC, which allegedly focused sunlight onto Roman warships to set them ablaze during the siege of Syracuse. And the first modern attempt to harness the power of the sun came in 1878 at the Paris World's Fair, where the French inventor Augustin Mouchout unveiled a solar steam engine, a machine powered by sunlight that, paradoxically, ran an ice maker. His creation earned a gold medal, and it was brilliant, although it quickly ran into some insurmountable problems. The efficiency of the solar-powered steam engine wasn't enough for real industrial work, and with coal becoming cheap and abundant, Mouchout's solar dream was seen as little more than a novelty. But Father Himalaya recognized the potential of Mouchout's work better than most, and began the long process of building his own solar machine. It was a tedious process that took place across 5 years and 4 countries, and one that nearly ended in public humiliation before it ever reached St. Louis. The first version appeared in the spring of 1900, assembled in Neuilly-sur-Seine, outside Paris, using a Fresnel lens, a type of flat, ridged optical element. It reached temperatures of approximately 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which was enough to prove his concept, but significantly lower than what was required for industrial work. A second version, built that same summer near the town of Sorede in southern France, pushed the temperature to roughly 1,600 degrees, sufficient to liquefy aluminum, but still short of the threshold for steel or copper. By 1901, Himalaya had redesigned the system entirely, replacing the Fresnel lens approach with a paraboloid mirror array. A paraboloid is a curved reflective surface, the same geometry found in a satellite dish or a flashlight reflector, that focuses incoming parallel light rays to a single focal point. Himalaya arranged thousands of small individual mirrors across this curved surface, each one carefully angled to direct sunlight toward a common focal point. Finally, he made one additional engineering decision that set his design apart from everything that had come before. He decoupled the furnace from the mirror assembly entirely, keeping the furnace stationary while the mirrors moved to track the sun. But in 1902, during the public debut of this new machine outside of Lisbon, ended in disaster. In front of a large crowd of spectators, which included King Carlos I of Portugal, the concentrated energy was so intense that the machine melted its own support leg, collapsing the structure and sending the crowd into a panic. This would be the last time Father Himalaya held a public demonstration before a European audience. In the summer of 1904, the fourth and final version, which Himalaya named the Pyrheliophor, from the Greek for the machine that carries the fire of the sun, was assembled by hand in Louisiana. And the scale of the 1904 World's Fair event was without precedent in American history. 20 million people passed through the gates of the Louisiana Purchase Exposition in St. Louis, a number equivalent to roughly a quarter of the entire country's population at the time. Visitors flocked to see baby incubators, X-ray machines, and a Ferris wheel large enough to carry over 2,000 passengers per rotation. But no creation drew the kind of sustained, disbelieving attention that gathered around Himalaya's mysterious device. The construction of the machine was completed in August of 1904, 3 months after the fair had already opened. It stood 43 feet tall and rested on circular rails, allowing the entire assembly to rotate horizontally as the sun moved across the sky. For vertical tracking, the mirror sector could be adjusted independently to compensate for the sun's changing elevation throughout the day. Both axes were governed by a clockwork mechanism, a precisely tuned series of gears and escapements driven by a wound spring, requiring no electricity and no motors, that synchronized the mirror array to the Earth's rotation automatically, maintaining the focus on the stationary furnace from dawn to dusk without any manual adjustment. The reflective surface covered roughly 860 square feet, composed of 6,117 individually mounted silvered glass mirrors, each approximately the size of a playing card. Together, they directed sunlight into a furnace, built to withstand temperatures as high as 7,200 degrees Fahrenheit, the maximum heat that Himalaya believed his machine could achieve. And what his machine could do was unlike anything that had been witnessed at the time. Himalaya demonstrated its power by liquefying blocks of iron within 60 seconds, fusing dust into solid rock, and vaporizing timber that would vanish without a single flame or smoke plume. Word of the remarkable demonstration spread, and soon delegations arrived from governments across Europe, Asia, and the Americas to witness its power. Reports from the time even describe offers from a Japanese contingent to purchase the device outright, and a separate proposition from the United States government for citizenship in exchange for ownership of the machine. The Pyrheliophor captured the world's attention. The New York Times and Scientific American both ran a feature on it, while the International Jury of Awards gave it the grand prize, the highest distinction the exposition could confer, accompanied by 2 gold medals, 1 silver medal, and a diploma signed by President Theodore Roosevelt. For a brief period in the autumn of 1904, the Pyrheliophor was the most discussed scientific instrument in the world. But as the World's Fair drew to a close, so did its moment of glory. As remarkable as the machine was, its timing couldn't have been worse. By the early 20th century, the world was all in on coal, and now oil too. Fortunes were being made off cheap fossil fuels, and few cared about solar power. Besides, the Pyrheliophor had its limits. It needed perfect weather to reach full power. Even at the fair, it reached a maximum temperature of only 6,800 degrees Fahrenheit on 3 clear days over 5 months. Plus, it was only a prototype. Father Himalaya himself admitted that he would need an investment of the equivalent of $1.5 million in today's money to turn this machine into a commercial reality, a risk no investor would take when coal was abundant and cheap. So the machine soon faded into obscurity, and accounts conflict on what happened to it next. Some say Father Himalaya attempted to have it housed at local universities, but had no success because of the high cost of relocating. Others claim the Pyrheliophor was dismantled and stored away, only for Himalaya to return and find its mirrors and clockwork mechanisms stolen. Or perhaps it met the same fate as the famous Ferris wheel, torn apart with dynamite and destroyed without ceremony. What's certain is this: the St. Louis World's Fair was the last time the Pyrheliophor was ever seen in public. After the fair, Father Himalaya spent a few more years in America before returning to Portugal, never to work on solar-powered machines again. He became a decorated member of the Portuguese Academy of Sciences and chose to pursue interests in explosives, as well as lecturing on a great deal of topics before dying in 1913. While the Pyrheliophor may never have changed the world, its principles laid the foundation of many of the solar machines that have emerged in the centuries since. 9 years after the World's Fair, an American engineer named Frank Schumann constructed a 60-kilowatt solar power station on the banks of the Nile at Maadi, Egypt, using parabolic reflectors to focus sunlight, generate steam, and drive an electric generator that pumped irrigation water. It was the first solar power installation built at anything approaching industrial scale, and it proved that the principles demonstrated in a St. Louis fairground could sustain continuous power generation. And in 1949, a solar furnace was constructed in the French mountain town of Mont-Louis, built on the same concentration principle Himalaya had refined, reaching temperatures above 6,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Its success prompted a far more ambitious project in 1970, the Odeon solar furnace in the French Pyrenees, known informally as the Godzilla Oven for its monstrous scale. 63 adjustable mirror arrays redirected sunlight into a 20,000 square foot parabolic reflector, concentrating the equivalent of 10,000 suns into a focal point just 16 inches wide. In 1981, the Soviet Union completed what remains the largest solar furnace in the world, outside Tashkent in Uzbekistan. And on smaller scales, the same principle of harnessing the sun's energy is already embedded in daily life across much of the developing world. Today, 3.7 million small-scale solar cookers are in active use around the world. And in India, where roughly 3/4 of the population are cremated, solar furnaces are being tested as a replacement for wood-burning pyres, saving over 600 pounds of firewood per cremation. What Father Himalaya demonstrated in a St. Louis field in the summer of 1904 is that the sun has the potential to solve many of our modern world problems if we're ready to embrace the technology. If you enjoyed this video, then I think you'll like our recent feature on parabolic trough solar systems. Make sure to give that a watch next.